Well, good evening to everyone and to those on the replay crew. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, whatever time you're tuning in. Love you guys on the replay crew and love the fact that you guys are here live, continuing with the coverage of the Kowalski trial. So, for those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Rob. I'm the owner of the channel Law and Lumber, and we've been covering the case of Maya Kowalski versus Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital. This is a case that stems from incidents and events that were covered in a Netflix documentary, Take Care of Maya, and they take place in Florida, in Sarasota. They involve a child that suffers from CRPS who was admitted to a hospital. And shortly after being admitted to the hospital, suspicions arose that there was Munchausen's by proxy. And the hospital initiated a DCF action. DCF then initiated a filing that resulted in an order that took custody away from Maya's parents. The allegations of the plaintiff's complaint are false imprisonment, battery, etc., medical malpractice, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress stemming from Beata Kowalski's ultimate decision to take her own life in what the plaintiffs allege was the only way that Maya would be freed from the hospital supervision and care. Because the allegations in this particular case are sensitive in nature, I do run a banner so that you guys are aware that what we're discussing is sensitive subject matter. I'll put that up in a moment. For those of you wondering why I'm covering this particular trial and who I am, who the person is on screen, my name is Rob. I'm a domestic relations practitioner, a divorce attorney, custody attorney in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I have been for more than 10 years. And this case is a fraught overlap of domestic relations litigation issues, as well as medical malpractice. Before we get rolling today, I did just want to make a quick observation and a comment. I'm not, even though I don't cover news on this channel, I'm not immune from reading headlines and noting that there's a significant amount of, concern for several people in the Mideast. And I know that several people have families in Israel and the surrounding region. And I'm just making a comment that I hope that everyone remains safe, that the family members are accounted for, and my well wishes to all of the family that is in the affected region. So just know that my thoughts and prayers are with all of you, really, very much. It's not an easy thing to go about. And like I said, I don't cover news, but I have friends with family in the region. So I hope that everyone stays safe. So let's go ahead and get into what we heard today in the Kowalski case. And it looks like the chat is just catching up. So it's taken a minute. In the Kowalski case today, we heard testimony from Jack Kowalski and Maya Kowalski. So the two principal plaintiffs in the case. Jack is the father of Maya Kowalski. He is suing alongside his son, Kyle, and his daughter, Maya. Maya was the patient, and he's also suing on behalf of the estate of Beata Kowalski. So that's kind of where we are. We are on day 11 of trial. Trial began, I think, on September 21st, and we're moving along. It looks like the trial is remaining on schedule for the most part, with hiccups here and there. So we're not going to cover too much of testimony from Maya and Jack, just because it is difficult. I listened to it twice, and it's kind of challenging. And I will try to interject here and there for the legal arguments that are being made. And we started the day with some legal argument over what documents they would be allowed to use. For those of you in the chat, why don't you drop a comment in the chat? Because I'm not sure if the chat is moving or not. That's my concern. It might be a StreamYard issue. And like I said, it looks like it's a StreamYard issue. Great. So StreamYard is not letting me see the live chat. Thank you, StreamYard. Wonderful. I would love to get to your questions, but my gosh. You know what? During one of these, how do I want to handle this? Because I really do want to see the commentary in the chat. Oh. Let me do this. I'm going to play the intro, leave the stream, come back into the stream, and maybe the chat will be moving. My concern is that if I keep going forward, I'm not going to be able to see your chats and comments. And I really hope it gets corrected. So give me one moment. Let me do this, and I'll jump back in. Actually, let's watch something from earlier in the trial. We'll do a little bit longer. Oh, nope. Chat updated. There we go. Oh, there we go. Okay, that was making me nervous for a bit. Thank you, StreamYard, for that fix. Don't know why that ended up working. Who needs a live chat? I do, because I like hearing the questions that you guys have and answering them along the way. So, but I'm going to pray for everyone who's having missing family, man. It's not an easy thing to go about. So I really do pray for people to all get check-ins from family members. And for those of you who are affected, I'm very, very sorry. It's not something I wish upon anybody. And it's a challenging situation to be in. So let's go ahead and get into the testimony from today. I have boosted the volume to 600%. So it's about as loud as I can get it. Now, with both streams, both Law and Crime and Tampa 13, the closed captioning was not enabled for today. So I'm sorry, before you guys start asking, I can't get the closed captioning up. It wasn't showing on Law and Crime, and it wasn't showing on Tampa 13. And even if it does start showing, I can't readjust and pull to a new stream because I've got to make sure I've got my timestamps in order. So let's go ahead and get into it. So as with the case, well, as the case has been going forward, the judge hears motions and evidentiary disputes before the jury is brought in. They've been meeting at 8:30, 8:15, depending on the day, beforehand to essentially go over what they anticipate using as evidence that particular day. It results in a lot of back and forth, and it kind of gives you an idea of what we're going to see. For example, a lot of Jack Kowalski's direct testimony, I'm not going to go through because we talked about a lot of that during day 10 because they were previewing that testimony in day 10 at the conclusion of that case. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it. You guys see that I already pulled up a text message that the plaintiffs want to rely on. And this was a text message exchange from two individuals in the hospital. And the defense wants this out. And once I read it, and the reason I paused on it was once that I read it, oh my gosh, I can see why the hospital wants it out. Text message begins, learned today that ketamine girl's mom committed unaliving yesterday. And I apologize for using that word, but YouTube doesn't like those words. So please don't use that word in the chat because the censors like to do the censoring thing. Learned today that ketamine girl's mom committed blank yesterday. Sorry to say my prediction was correct. I've been busy with an ethics consult, so haven't done anything about order sets yet. Put in 6 hours interviewing people today, and it's not done yet. Response, OMG, I am parking on call tonight. This is terrible. Back to the original person. Hope your all night is good. Blank is in CV, so you can have a dinner partner. I know we did the right thing, but is really effed up. I feel bad. Response, I don't know all the details, but I think the courts and psychiatrists finally called it what it was. I had another mother do the same thing. We definitely did the right thing for the child. We did. Who told you? Question Laura Drack. That's one of the hospital staff. At lunch, Alex, the hospitalist, and PMR doc was there too. Laura's been consulting to give input on grief counseling. OMG, well, I really hope she has a chance at a better life now. And I can already see in the chat. Yeah. Yes, they referred to her as ketamine girl. And I can see people already saying these texts were brutal. They were. Hate that they called her that. They did. And the hospital notably tries to keep this out. And they should. I mean, they should try to keep it out. It's discovered after the fact. It kind of just goes to how they were treating her within the hospital. So let's hear some of the argument on this one.
Anything else?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Rewind. Sorry, guys. Give me 1 second.
We need to continue to the next page.
No. Who's in the green and who's in the blue?
Your Honor, I believe Dr. Tepa Sanchez is in the blue. We have a demonstrative aid that clarifies this issue. And Dr. Vos, who's the other? Those are the two in the conversation.
Okay, and what page or pages of this document are you seeking to use?
This page here, Your Honor, and then this page.
So when you say this page, page 3.
Yes, Your Honor, and page 4.
Okay, anything else?
I don't believe so. Unless they want for completeness, I mean, the documentation of exactly when and where is in with it. The kind of metadata is contained on that additional pages.
Judge, we object to page 4. These text messages, first of all, have no relevance to any of the claims currently before this jury. They don't go to any of the allegations regarding any communication with the plaintiffs. There's no indication that the plaintiffs ever knew about these text messages until well into this litigation. They don't go to battery. They don't go to negligence. They don't go to breaches of standard of care. These are text messages months after either of these documents.
Two minutes in, Rob, 2 minutes in. Well, 11 minutes in, muted. Gosh darn it. I want to use the cursey words, but I can't. I know that you guys, the mic is quiet in the courtroom during these motions arguments. They don't stand right next to the mic that picks it up. So it's kind of a moving target. It's impossible to get the volume right. And I feel for them trying to get the volume up and and basically get the attorneys, but not anybody else in the courtroom. If you don't hear it at all, please let me know. But if it's really low, I can't do anything else about it. So I'm still trying my best. It's one of those things that's really difficult. And Jules has been in the courtroom every day. The jury read those texts very closely. I imagine that they did. And I do see this. I see this point. Doctors and nurses who deal with the trauma every day find a way to distance themselves to preserve their sanity. I may understand this, but it still kind of ticks me off a bit. And I think that's one of the points that they're trying to make here is the attorney goes and begins arguing that they're not relevant because they're not discovered until well after the fact. That might technically be true, but plaintiffs make a good argument for including them. And apparently this was one that they argued on over the weekend. So let's listen to the argument and then I'll interject where I can.
Doctors had any contact with any of the Kowalskis. And so we object to them being admitted. We object to testimony regarding them.
I mean, I, over the weekend, overruled the,
Well, we were going to ask to revisit that with the judge, actually.
okay, well, I'm going to let in pages 3 and 4. So I guess the question is, do you want the balance of the document or just pages?
No, I think this
I guess
shows the
pages 2.
time and date of them on the right. The rest would be just a duplication of the same messages.
So it's 2, 3, and 4, Mr. Whitman?
2, 3, 4, yes, thank you.
But again, we object to relevance.
I'm going to receive pages 2, 3, and 4 of Exhibit 2060.
Judge, can we inquire?
Oh,
of the
sorry.
court-
I apologize. 2175.
Can we inquire of the court as to the relevance of these?
This tells you how much they don't want these in. This tells you how much they don't want them in. Usually when the judge makes a ruling, they don't really revisit it. They might ask the court to reconsider, etc. This is one of those situations where in trials that I have had, when a judge rules disfavorably to me on an evidentiary objection or a ruling, what I will do is I will say, Judge, just to make the record clear, I want to understand the court's ruling and I want the record to adequately and accurately reflect the court's ruling. So I would like the court to clarify whether the court is finding this to be relevant because, and explain. Is it a little bit of posturing? Yes. Is it also important to keep the record clean? Yes. So it's one of those things where you see the hospital really realizing they do not want these messages. Pardon me. They do not want these messages in. And I apologize for that. I was eating earlier. They don't want the message in. They know how bad they are, and they really want the judge to articulate how this is deemed reasonable.
Text messages done in January. We honestly don't understand the relevance to.
Your Honor, Maya in that hospital was treated like property and dehumanized. And these confirm that. They refer to her rather than her name as ketamine girl in her treatment. They refer to the involvement of Sally Smith earlier on. Parent agency is an issue in this case. They refer to the attitude towards the mother, the intentional infliction of emotional distress. All of these things are materially relevant to this lawsuit.
Methodology of brief counseling is also.
Judge, we disagree that that's relevant to any of the issues in this case.
I see that these text messages are highly relevant in this case, and I'm going to overrule the request not to admit the text messages. What's next?
Your Honor, I'd like to skip down to the second.
All right, so there we go. First issue. Judge Carroll, who's presiding over this particular case, views them as being highly relevant. People have made comments about the judge and whether they think he's fair or not fair. I think he's called a fair trial. The judge is tasked with calling balls and strikes and keeping people within the bounds of the complaint and the four corners of the arguments that are allowed to be made. That was a good call. The judge basically said the allegation that has been made is that Maya is treated as property. This goes to substantiate that from the hospital's side, not so much from the plaintiff's side as far as seeing it and realizing it, but from the hospital side as far as their intention, whether they intended to make this person feel this way, or whether they acted with gross disregard for the fact that the patient would feel this way. So that was one that I think was a fair ruling and very disfavorable to the hospital because these messages now go in. They now go in, and now they can be brought up in, I think, any context as far as the testimony is concerned. Now, where I want to jump to is the next part is actually in cross-examination. So Mr. Anderson handles the direct examination of Jack Kowalski. Jack Kowalski is called to the stand, and he testifies substantially in line with what we covered on day 10. So if you guys are curious about that, please go back and review that. But I don't want to go through that entire thing. What I do want to do is go into the cross-examination, which is handled by Mr. Shapiro. In my opinion, interesting choice of who you would choose to handle the sensitive parties, because Mr. Shapiro kind of has a style that might be a little bit condescending. And Mr. Shapiro, well, he kind of steps in it here. And there was a series of rulings where the judge allowed Mr. Kowalski to testify to his opinion of what was taking place and why it was taking place. And Shapiro keeps on pushing. And he pushed a little bit too far, and we got a response from him that was pretty emotional. And it was kind of a fault of defense's own creation by asking the question and hoping to keep the witness boxed in, but can only do so much.
I never witnessed. No.
Okay. The supervision of the phone calls that you spoke about earlier, you agreed, do you not, that your wife Beata was making statements about Maya's medical care that were not in Maya's best interests? True.
Objection.
Legal basis.
Assumes facts not in evidence and assumes those facts.
Overruled.
Say that question again.
Sure. During the period of time where your wife was calling Maya, she was calling and demanding medical treatments, and you yourself did not agree with your wife doing that, correct?
Not all the time. And my wife had the right to question medical. We still had our parent rights.
You actually told your wife to knock it off.
That was after I was told to leave the hospital.
Mr. Kowalski.
Okay, I caught the mute button. Okay. First hint that you better be careful in how you're phrasing your questions. This witness wants to give full sentence answers, not yes or no. He wants to give full sentence answers. He really wants to give his answers. Trying to box him out on a yes or no is going to get him saying yes, but, no, but, and clarifying. Shapiro starts walking down this road, and he ultimately, I think, one question too far. Like there's a saying that we use when we talk about trial advocacy, and it's one that's taught to a lot of us one that's taught to a lot of us when we're in law school. And it's basically on cross-examination, you don't ask a question you don't already know the answer to. And the example that's always heard is in relation to a potential vehicle accident, right? And some altercation that takes place, the driver gets out, and all of a sudden he's engaged with the adverse party. And the attorney on cross in this hypothetical always says, well, you didn't actually see, you didn't actually see my client put hands on your client. Well, no, I didn't. Well, you didn't actually see my client get up close to your client. No, I didn't. Well, and you didn't actually see what the plaintiff's alleging, that my client bit your client's ear off. And the person says no. He says, well, how do you know that it was my client that did it? And the example that we always hear is that's the question that's one too many. You're on a roll and you get in your groove and you're going, oh, good, I've got it. One question too many. How do you know that he bit the ear off? And the answer in the hypothetical we get in law school is, well, he spit it out. It's just a lesson. It's just a lesson that says you got to be real careful when you're cross-examining an adverse witness, because you don't know what they're going to say. And you have to box them in with yes and no to the extent you can. And when the witness wants to go further, you got to be careful because you don't know where they're going to go with it. And if the judge is giving leeway, then you might find yourself in a precarious situation.
My question to you, yes or no, you had told your wife to knock it off when she was calling the hospital.
Let me finish where that was, because you're taking it and putting it somewhere else. That was the day that I had to walk out of your hospital and I was told my daughter is not under my custody anymore. I drove all the way home from St. Pete. I caught myself doing 15 miles an hour driving on I-75. I was so upset. And when I got home, my wife was on the phone talking to the nurse at the hospital. And that's why I told her to knock it off. So that's where that was. So don't put it somewhere else.
But you also told your wife to stop calling the hospital and demanding treatment even after that point, true?
That was during that time. That
Mr.
was that recording.
With regard to the photographs, Mr. Kowalski,
Ruh-roh. Judge let him run. That was one where, and this is a tough one, because the plaintiff, you have to be careful in cross-examination. You don't want to come across as too aggressive. Shapiro can have this tendency of coming across as too aggressive. And with this particular plaintiff, you really don't want to alienate the jury. The plaintiff, the jury has only heard the plaintiff's side for right now. And you've been stuck on playing defense. And when you're playing defense, you don't want to score an own goal. We talked about that on day 10 as well. There's a massive own goal in some of these questions. This was one that was, and I see the comment here, art therapy with Amanda. Great comment. Right, hang on. Great comment. Don't badger the grieving dad. Yeah, don't. And if you are going down that road, be very careful about what questions you're asking. Now with Maya, Shapiro does cross-examination as well, and he does a better job at it. I will say overall, Shapiro did a good job at cross. These are difficult cross-examinations. He did a better job than I thought he was going to do. When he stood up and I heard his voice, I'm going, oh, this is going to be interesting. He did a better job than I thought he would. But he still slipped into a couple of things. And what you're kind of wondering is the witness going to get really snippy and alienate the jury themselves? Will they get angry? Will they fight you? Or will they deliver some very articulate response that is both emotional but impactful? I have made this comment when we talked about the Depp v. Heard case. In Depp v. Heard, Isaac Baruch was, I think, one of the first witnesses that were called on behalf of Johnny Depp, and he was an emotional client. And Elaine Bredehoff handled the cross-examination. Elaine goes and starts asking these questions and does that same thing, ask that one question too many. And Baruch gave a response that was impactful, emotional, and Elaine couldn't cut it off because you have asked the question, you have stepped in it, you have opened the door. So the witness is allowed to answer. this was one that I cannot say is anything other than own goal. But it's tough. How do you get the information out? So I thought that was a well-fashioned response. So I want to fast forward here to my favorite part of any of these, which is the witness questions or the jury questions. A lot of people are going to ask. The jury in this trial get to ask questions. After the plaintiff and defense has asked all of their questions, the judge poses the question to the jury. Does the jury have any questions? The jury passes up notes. They say, here are our questions. And the judge reads the questions aloud, those questions that are not objectionable. They have a bench conference beforehand to go over any objections to the questions that are about to be asked. And they decide which ones are within the bounds of the evidentiary rules and which this plaintiff can properly answer. The jury has been remarkably interested in the testimony of all of the witnesses. I have found that their questions are remarkably on point. They are very attentive. And I find it curious where the jury focuses their inquiry. Because as an attorney, you can think that certain parts of your case are going to land one way or the other, but it's up to the jury to determine what evidence or what information they view to be more or less credible, they view to be more or less impactful. So I've really found these jury questions to be remarkable. I really do focus on them because I like having heard all of the direct and cross-examination, having heard where the jury is focusing their attention. So that's why I've been covering these, because I find these to be really interesting. And I try to cover the parts of direct and cross that end up being questions that the jury asks. So let's see what the jury asks here.
Did you have the opportunity to hear
Whoop.
about them?
Fast forward a little bit too much. Rewind. My bad. It was at 121 even. So we'll go back a little bit before that. 222.
As a question, you said you did not see the photos we were just discussing. Did you have the opportunity to hear about them? Perhaps from Maya as an example.
At that time, before I seen them, yes, I was advised around that rate shortly after that. Yes.
Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor, the witnesses, may the witness not be excused, but.
Nothing further.
Okay, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, members of the jury, in a moment, we're going to take a break. I should have done this before Mr. Kowalski testified. There's 2 instructions I need to give you. I'll give you these 2 instructions and then we'll take a short break. On Friday, September 29th, 2023, you heard the testimony of Mrs. Meg Boland. She is the woman who testified by Zoom from North Carolina. During her testimony, a Facebook text message that she received on November 17th, 2016 from Maya Kowalski was introduced into evidence. That text message was introduced as evidence of Maya Kowalski's state of mind on November 17th, 2016. The text message was not introduced as proof of any of the factual statements or opinions that Maya Kowalski made in that text message. In your deliberations at the end of this case, you should consider this text message only as evidence of Maya Kowalski's state of mind at that time. So that's the first one. The second instruction. During the testimony of Dr. Henschke, there was evidence presented that Ms. Kowalski has experienced stress related to this current lawsuit. Although I have determined that this evidence is relevant to the issues in this case that you will be instructed on later, any stress that a party to a lawsuit experiences because of their involvement in a lawsuit is not a matter for which damages are recoverable in that lawsuit. Okay, with that, members of the jury, we're going to take a short break. Let's try to keep it to 10 minutes. Do not discuss this case amongst yourselves. Do not do any investigation and receive no information. We'll see you in about 10 minutes.
All right. So we've got jury instructions. This has happened intermittently throughout the trial, and we're still waiting on one of the most pivotal jury pivotal jury instructions, that being the instruction concerning the orders, the DCF orders, and how to take them. Rather, what dates are relevant for the jury. The jury has not yet heard that. This is an instruction the judge is still going back and forth with the attorneys on, so we anticipate hearing that at some point in time. I'm not going to play the beginning of Maya's testimony. The reason why is I want to leave some time that to go over the jury questions, and I also want to go over some of the arguments. If you guys want to go and watch the entirety of her, I'll do that right now. If you guys want to go watch the entirety of her testimony, I'm going to leave it in the description to the video so that you guys have that. I'll leave links to the Tampa 13 streams. Give me one moment and I will do that just so that it's there in case you guys go want to watch the full trial testimony. Full trial testimony. Morning, afternoon, below the afternoon session. Let me make sure I've got that link up. Make sure I've got the morning link up. Do we remember how to do all of this? We do, for the most part. It's important because people have asked about it. Where can I find the full testimony? And that's where it is. So again, these are recaps. Before we get to some of Maya Kowalski stuff, let me catch up on super chats and make sure that I thank the people that are here. If you are here for the first time, please consider liking the stream. It's just a button click, doesn't cost you anything. It honestly just helps people see that we're doing these recaps, and this is a trial a lot of people are asking questions about. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. Again, subscription, no cost to you. You just get notifications of when we're going live. Make sure you hit the notification bell so that you do get those notifications. It really does do a lot. We are driving towards 200,000 subscribers, and the Kowalski trial and the coverage of this trial is important to a lot of you. So please consider subscribing. This is not my full-time gig. I am a full-time practicing attorney. I do these recaps in whatever time I've got, and this trial was important to me, so I've been trying to recap the testimony every day. Matt Bond, thank you for the super chat. Good day from the future, my spiffy legal mumbo jumbo talky brother from another brother. Good day, Matt. I hope you're doing all right. Mike Dorado, how was their court today? Thank you for doing this. There was court today because the Florida courts did not have a holiday today. For those of you who enjoyed the holiday, I hope you enjoyed it with your family and spent time doing some stuff that you can't really do during the weekdays when you are working. But no, Florida did have court today. This was a question I started or come in this card just because devil's advocate, they probably used that phrase to prevent the HIPAA violation reference in the text. Probably true. It might be true, but it still gets presented to the jury. And that's something that they have to kind of think about. Vez, thank you for the super sticker. Much appreciated. Chicken Meat, thank you for the membership. Haley Mouse, thank you. You're reverting back to lawyer Rob from YouTube. Rob, trying to. Well, I'm still a lawyer. Pants, didn't have creepy I can be your mom on the bingo card. Yep, that was testified to in direct. We're not going to cover that, so I can kind of summarize. The allegations are that Kathy Beatty, the social worker that was contracted by the hospital, the employee of the hospital, in one of these incidents, was referring to the medical adoption proceeding. Actually, this is a good place to make this clarification. Some of the testimony from today from Maya Kowalski referred to the family adoption process. And this was an opportunity, or this is an opportunity for me to kind of explain DCF, the dependency court, and the process. So Department of Children and Families, they go by various names in various states, so it's jurisdictional dependent. They have the authority, because they are the state agency that is charged with protection of children, to initiate removal proceedings. They can essentially say that they have information and belief that probable cause exists that a child will be subjected to abuse, neglect, or abandonment, and therefore the state asks to intercede. They ask that they be allowed to take action and remove the child from the care of the parents. When that happens and the judge finds probable cause, the judge enters an order that removes the child from the care of the parents. At that point in time, the court has essentially taken custody from the parents and placed it with the Department of Children and Families. The Department of Children and Families then goes about creating a family plan. The plan has various goals. There's various goals for every situation. Some goals are reunification. That's always the primary goal that should be considered. Reunification. What do we have to do to get this family back to the place where they can be reunified as a family unit? That respects the fundamental right that parents have to parent their children. Then, in cases where reunification is off the table, they look at close family placement. Can we place the child with the close family members and supervise for a period of time before making a final determination? They also have temporary foster care placement, where the child is placed in a temporary foster situation while the parents are engaging in their part of the plan, what they have to do to bring themselves back into what the court perceives as being a household that is fit for this child. Then they have permanent foster placement or permanent family placement or permanent adoption status. These are all potential outcomes of these proceedings. And like I said, it's very fact intensive, very fact specific. If you find yourself in an issue like this, please consult with a family lawyer in your area. It's very important that you do have counsel throughout the proceedings because at the end of the day, one of the potential outcomes is the possibility of the state seeking to terminate parental rights. What we have here is an allegation that DCF initiated this, and the plan wasn't so much reunification, that the plan at some point in time involved the possibility of foster placement. And Kathy Beatty, the social worker for the hospital, explained this to Maya, explained what the foster placement might be. Whether you think that's appropriate or not, that's the allegation in the case. Personally, DCF is charged with explanation of all of this stuff. They should be the one doing it. I think Kathy Beatty here, there's a lot of evidence that she overstepped her bounds on the responsibilities that she was tasked with. We will see what the defense puts on in rebuttal or in response. We are waiting until all the evidence comes in. But one of the allegations was that Maya said that when Kathy Beatty was explaining the possibility of a temporary placement in foster care, that Maya Kowalski testifies that Ms. Beatty said, I would like to be your mother. I can be your mom, that I can be the foster care placement. If that's true, well, if you're feeling a certain way about it, the jury might be feeling a certain way about it too. So I'm just going to leave it there. We're going to listen to the judge, give instructions on it later when we get to the final jury determination. But there's a lot going on here about what is or is not within the confines of the order. Linnea Bixter, thanks for the membership. Whiskey Sour, there's no excuse to start a text conversation about patients. Healthcare providers, they are professionals in a line of work where you don't see human beings at their best. Whiskey Sour, I think that was a series of unfortunate texts. And I think it was a lapse in judgment to engage in that via text message. Attorneys will have back and forth communications, but that also is kind of protected as confidential and privileged as between the attorneys, unless that privilege is waived. This was something I did not expect to see between healthcare professionals. I don't know that I've seen it before. I have seen doctors' notes where they consult with one another and they do kind of, not to say talk shop, but they talk about similar patients. But in every case where I've had psychotherapists or doctors' notes and they go through this, I always ask the question of whether it was appropriate to engage in that type of dialogue. And it's always a risk that when you're putting these into notes that they will end up in front of a jury or a judge at some point in time. But thank you for the observation. Robin, Shermantine, Shapiro did a great job overall. I don't think he did bad. I was skeptical. I was nervous. I don't think he did terrible. I think we saw a different version of him in cross today than we did in previous instances. Leslie Matase, thank you for becoming a channel member. Okay, let's get in to the afternoon. I want to make sure I'm at the right timestamp here. Remove that one. Get to this one. Nope, it's none of those, Rob. Why would it not be any of those? Because I didn't restart the stream. Let's go. There we go. Pull up the feed. Present the other one. And now we're into the afternoon. We're going to hear a little bit of argument from Mr. Hunter. He's counsel for the defense. And he's arguing about Dr. Kirkpatrick and certain recordings that Dr. Kirkpatrick made during interviews and discussion. And reason I pulled this clip is because I have heard judges use the phrase, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the judge makes a ruling in one direction that's favorable to one party, you expect the judge to make the similar ruling in opposition when it comes to the other side. You want consistency out of a judge. And I think the judge has been consistent here, but let's hear Mr. Hunter try to get these audio recordings in.
Expressly that he made those recordings, video recordings with audio in the ordinary course of his practice. And so he had no expectation of privacy when the audio was made by Ms. Kowalski, whether or not he had actual notice of it.
Your
So
Honor,
we were going to use those things, and I frankly intend to use some of them in the cross-examination of Dr. Kirkpatrick tomorrow.
Are we using them with Ms. Maya Kowalski today?
Not to my knowledge, Judge.
Your Honor, we'd ask the court to take notice that they're not giving you any testimony. They're not producing any testimony on this because they're misconstruing his testimony as to these dates. He's been clear for at least the past 2 years that there are no video recordings on those dates. None exist.
Okay, so
I beg to differ.
at the end of the day, if there's not a clean issue of consent, I'm going to need to resolve that. So I will need to either see the competing affidavits or accept testimony on the issue. But the reality is, if there is no consent that's clear, or that it's in a situation where there's not a clear or not an expectation of privacy, then it's not coming in, not going to be played. So
I understand, Your Honor. I'm looking right now at a summary of follow-up evaluations of Maya Kowalski prepared by Dr. Kirkpatrick. One with the initial evaluation of 9/23/15. It lists dictated initial evaluation, handwritten notes of the evaluation, new patient information form reviewed with the patient and mother, pre-treatment video performed with pain thresholds recorded. A similar set of descriptions of records available exists with respect to 11/2/2015. So the point we were going to make previously, again, before there was an agreement to put these into evidence, was that there was an intention on the part of Dr. Kirkpatrick to record those encounters as part of his records. And your Honor will be told, and we'll see, all the rest of his encounters with this patient were videoed.
perhaps, but
So
it sounds like
well,
I
they
need
just-
evidence on
They just
this.
disappeared.
At one point, this allegation that there was agreement on these coming into evidence, just to remind the court, there were 151 joint exhibits. And in the days leading up to jury selection, the defense withdrew agreement on about 80 of those and then added a couple. These were among the last ones that they added. It was an oversight on our part, but there was never agreement to have these.
Again, I'm going to need evidence on this issue until we get it resolved. 1076, 1077, and 1078 will not be played to the jury.
And very well, Your Honor, but I
And
will.
It sounds like
Yeah, judge says, sounds like I'm gonna need evidence on this. We're gonna have to find out if we're playing the audio at all. And it was one of those where I didn't let the plaintiffs bring it in. Not letting you bring it in right now. You want to bring it in later? We can talk about it later, but it's not gonna be right now. So let's get to the beginning of Maya's testimony during the afternoon session, and we'll play some of this at about 1.5 speed just so that we can get through some of it. But there's a couple of points in her testimony I do want to focus on. Because the jury does kind of focus on it. And guys, I apologize. For some reason, StreamYard is doing the same thing. I can't see the live chat in StreamYard, and I hope it corrects itself. I don't know what else to say. So I'm just gonna have to run with it. I will try to get the questions. I'll see if I can't pull the video up or the live stream up on a different tab and see if I can't navigate it. But StreamYard chose a really nice day. You know, Maya Kowalski on the stand. Let's go ahead and make today the day that we're not going to show the live chat, because, you know, why not? Why not, StreamYard? Anyways, let's go ahead and listen to the beginning of Maya's testimony in the afternoon session. It's up at 1.5 speed. Again, The raw footage is linked in the description to the video.
When we left, we were right up to the point of the infamous October 7th admission. I want you to tell the jury at this point in the midst of your relapse, your first relapse, what symptoms you had.
I had the same burning pain, but this time it was more amplified than it was when I was getting the infusions. And I had lesions coming back. I had discoloration and change in temperatures. And my dystonia was more prevalent. Sorry, forgot.
And you were obviously in a wheelchair.
Still in a wheelchair.
Now, before October 7th, had you had this problem in the gut with being able to pass?
And just like that, thank you, StreamYard. That was awesome. Thank you for booting me. Awesome. Fantastic. We weren't in the middle of testimony or anything. Let's go ahead and rewind it a little bit and see if we can't catch up where we were. I think we were just a few seconds before this. I apologize, guys. This is usually it's
Now,
me,
before
not
October
StreamYard.
7th, had you had this problem in the gut with being able to pass food through because of the CRPS?
That was a problem that was more with my CRPS, yes, constipation.
Okay. And had you been to Johns Hopkins the week before October 1st to visit?
Yes.
And what was that for? Was it for the same thing, the stomach issues,
Yes.
the lower stomach issues? Okay. And at this point, you were what, 10 years old?
I was fine.
So let's talk a little bit about that visit. So do you remember the why of going there that day, that morning?
October 7th?
The 7th.
Okay. Yes. So I was in excruciating pain. And this time my stomach was also like, it was awful. I was complaining. My knees were up to my chest. I was crying. So my dad took me in.
Right. So it was your father, not your
Yes.
mother, that took you in?
And then the week prior, my dad also took me in.
Tell me something. When you would go back to Johns Hopkins or and any of the doctors there, were they immediately aware of the history, or did your dad or mom have to explain it every time, your history? Overall.
Actually, yeah, my parents always had to re-explain my history of CRPS.
From what you saw, was it frustrating for your family, your mom and dad, to have to explain the same thing every time you come in?
Most definitely.
All right. So, so you come in and your dad gives the summary of, or describes your history. What do you recall after that?
I remember just being in the ER, but I wasn't in the ER for too long. I remember I was transferred to the PICU.
All right. And up to that point, while you're in the ER and up to the certain event, were you in pain? Were you calm? Were you active? What was your outward manifest?
I was actively in pain, yes.
Were you thrashing or acting out in any way at that point?
At that point, no.
So they took you up to the PICU, and tell the jury what happened then.
When I was transferred to the PICU, I remember my mom came in at some point. The nurses and doctors wanted to put a tube down my nose. And with CRPS, I mean, a blood pressure cuff, that hurts. So imagine, like a tube being shoved down your nose into your stomach. And obviously that would have caused so much pain. And I knew my body, I knew I was not going to be able to tolerate that. That is the only time I asked for sedation. I didn't just randomly yell out, I need sedation, like depicted in the medical records. I only asked for sedation when they wanted to do that procedure.
And then were you given sedation before they tried to put this tube down your nose?
I was not. And my mom was actually in the room and she listened to the doctors and didn't demand for sedation. Instead, about I would say 2 or 3 people held me down and tried to get the tube down my nose. That is when I was screaming, crying, and thrashing around. I did not curse at any of the staff. That is a lie. But they were not able to get it down, which I suspected because of the pain.
Were you fairly religious? Did you curse as a matter of course as a religious 10-year-old?
I never really cursed. I mean, I always thought it was really bad when people did it.
Okay. Later on, you heard that in the hospital, though, from others. But
Yes, from
we'll talk
staff.
about that. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, they tried to do this. And so how did it feel when the doctors or nurses, I guess, held you down? Describe it in more detail. Where did they grab you? How hard they grabbed you, so forth?
Well, it was just like the upper body portion because they were trying to get the tube in my nose. So they were holding on my shoulders and just like my chest area. But again, they were not able to do it. Ultimately, they had to use sedation.
Okay. And I want to ask something right now, Maya. Do you have a symptom that while you're up here, you might manifest known as myoclonic jerking?
Yeah, so I don't know if people have noticed this, but normally when I'm sitting in the courtroom and whatnot, I have these like little twitches. It could be anywhere from, my feet to the head. They're kind of random. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just a symptom of CRPS and it's involuntary. And because I'm not getting my infusions at this point in time, unfortunately, they're going to be getting worse and worse.
Okay. So now you're being held down and you got sedation. What do you recall after that?
Well, I do remember the tube being in my nose. I remember my mom having to leave on a certain day, and this was the last time I talked to her.
Okay. Now, and before I forget, there was, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I'll make sure I get to this. Before we go on, by this point, did you know what having a ketamine infusion, the feeling of ketamine inside you was?
Yes,
Were you able to tell throughout this period and after you had started having them with Dr. Kirkpatrick and Dr. Cantrew and Dr. Hannah, were you able to tell when your body was receiving ketamine?
yes.
And how could you tell?
I could tell because the pain level, first off, it was lowered, and there's like a feeling. It's like, I don't know how to explain it, but you could just tell, like, you feel a little bit funny. It's not your normal self.
Okay. And then tell the jury whether, the best of your knowledge and for everything you saw, heard, felt, your mom ever gave you IV ketamine at home.
Never through the IV, no.
How did she give it to you?
It was orally administered, which was okay by the doctor and everything. It tasted a little bit weird, so at one point I asked her to add Gatorade to it, so it's just easier to go down.
But the prescription itself, and if you're aware, great. If you're not, it's okay. The prescription itself, what did it read? Did it say oral? Did it say intravenous? Did it say?
The bottle itself?
Yes.
Yeah, it said intravenous, but it was only for oral purposes.
So you applied out of the bottle to the Gatorade.
Right. Never through the IV.
You never had an IV ketamine at home.
Not at home, no.
All right. So now you're, sorry to jump around. You're back in the hospital, and did they start to examine you? And if so, what happened after that, if you recall? Or do you recall much after you were sedated would be a better question.
No, but I do remember being in the PICU.
All right. And was there anything else that you recall? Was it just one nurse coming in and out, or were there more people there?
In the PICU, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I
This-
remember, well, because I couldn't walk or anything, I had to have help using the bathroom. And I remember, it's quite embarrassing, but my dad was helping me clean up and a doctor came in, or so I thought, a doctor, because I knew it looked like a doctor because all of them wear this like white lab coat and then there's colored squares across their chest. Usually there's like a name embroidered in, but I didn't see that on her. So I assumed she was a doctor. She came in very briefly and it was awkward because here I am, naked from the bottom down after using the restroom. And she's asking my dad questions. And then she left the room.
And did you subsequently find out who that was?
Later, I found out it was Sally Smith.
Did anyone from the hospital differentiate Sally Smith from any of the other doctors that you were seeing that day?
Absolutely not.
Did Dr. Smith explain her role in any way?
Never.
And did she question your dad? And I don't know about you, but did she question you or your dad about symptoms and history?
Overall.
No, I do not recall that.
Now, after Dr. Smith, then, was your mom telling the doctors? Do you recall who was in there at that time, the doctor-wise? If you don't,
I don't know their names, sorry.
Man, female, male.
It was usually more than one, but sometimes they came in individually. And it was mixed gender.
All right. And so, was your mom explaining the symptoms? And
She always did. I mean, that was pretty routine. She had to do that for almost every visit.
was your mom worried from what you could tell, or excited? How would you describe her?
Well, she was definitely worried about her kid. And we had just moved to Florida. And I don't know if you know, but there was a hurricane during this time. So I think everyone was kind of on edge.
Did you learn at that time or subsequently why you went to Johns Hopkins as opposed to other hospitals? Or, well, there was a Johns Hopkins in Sarasota, wasn't there?
I don't know, but it was a distance thing. We were staying at the Ronald McDonald House
Oh, okay.
because at the time it was easier to get to my infusion place with Dr. Hannah rather than driving from Venice to wherever he was located. And it just so happened that the Ronald McDonald House is very close to Johns Hopkins Children's Hospital.
So you're on campus, in other words, the Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, pretty close.
All right. And so your mom told them about the symptoms. Do you recall them questioning you at all about your symptoms?
No,
So what happened after that, to the best of your knowledge? Did you stay up, go to sleep? What?
well, like I said, there wasn't ever a specific time where I saw the doctors and nurses ask my mom to leave. It was only because this was the day that she had to go to work. And that was my last conversation with her. Whereas with my dad, I vividly remember people coming in and telling him that this was his last time to say goodbye to me.
So was this the last time you saw your mom?
The last time I saw my mom, my dad wasn't there. I was laying in the bed,
This was while you're in your room. Did you
still in the PICU.
Still in the PICU?
Still in the PICU, yes.
So this is pretty close to when you checked in?
Yes,
Got it done?
yes. I know I was still in the PICU. My mom was like
Warning, she gets emotional here.
picking up her work bag and just like little things she had brought to the hospital. And she said, I love you and I'll see you tomorrow. And I never saw her again.
Need some water? I noticed you're wearing a necklace. Why don't you explain that?
Yeah, so
Further warning, this part gets tough. Just a warning, this part gets tough.
December 10th was my birthday. I turned 11, and I was unfortunately still in the hospital at the time. And the hospital has this program where they collect funds for children who are still in the hospital on their birthday. I was given $20 to spend. And I remember the social worker came in, and she asked me what I'd like to buy. I bought a Nerf gun for my brother. I bought my mom a necklace, and then I bought my dad his favorite bag of mints because I didn't have a lot of money left over. But then my Aunt Wendy bought him this little glass Christmas tree, and we just said it was for me. But I bought my mom this very specific necklace that says "I love you" to the moon and back. It's just like she always said that to me. And then I found out later that she wore it every single day, and when she was found in the garage, she was still wearing it. I have it on my neck right now.
Have some water.
Sorry.
Get through it. Can we publish 2571-001? We're going to switch for a second to mine and ask you about obvious symptoms at the time of your admission. Now, the record reflects it. This is October 8th, 2016. So this would have been the day after you came in.
Yes,
And was it Friday? And then this one would have been on a Saturday.
correct.
All right. And what is that there?
It's a lesion, and again, the same thing. It's just smaller ones connecting.
Okay. Now, since that time, have you had the opportunity to review some of the Johns Hopkins records that were supposed to be documenting your condition here and there?
Yes.
All right. Let's show.
This part's pretty important. It's about the records and what was documented versus what she was observing. And this is one where the hospital's relying on a lot of the records and what was taken. And they rely on that because they basically are making the argument that, look, these are treating physicians and nurses. And the records that they're taking are accurate, and we're going to presume them to be accurate. They're allowed in over hearsay objection because they're taking the ordinary course of business. There's a view in the law that when individuals carrying out the tasks of their normal business practices are jotting down notes, that they are inherently more credible than just if they had recalled it offhand. So they're allowed in. But what the plaintiffs are doing here is they're basically trying to show via Maya that Hopkins at some point in time during the course of treatment, when they went to this Munchausen's by proxy or Munchausen's by proxy diagnosis, that they stopped documenting things a certain way and changed the manner of documentation. And I thought this was pretty pivotal because this is a big part of the plaintiff's case. If you just go off the notes, the hospital's fine. But if you believe Maya, then the notes themselves become questionable. And then, as does every note that the hospital has introduced. I don't know whether that is or is not the case. Again, we're in the plaintiff's case. We don't know what the defense is going to produce. But this was a big part for the plaintiff's case in trying to discredit the documentation from the hospital.
1001-2645, and I'll represent for the record. It'll show it's the skin assessment for that same day. All right, so it's got one circular red scab and one circular pink,
Yes.
but nothing else about the other lesions on your body?
Correct.
Did you have one on your back or not?
I had one on my back, but I also had them in other areas, which they failed to document.
So the ones they're talking about here, and this can be confusing, they're talking about the one on your back, or did they ever talk about the one on your legs?
They
The
never-
ones on your legs.
Yeah, no, they didn't. Not on that date.
Okay, let's continue then. So you begin your stay there. Were your mom and dad able to come see you in your room at this time?
At this time, yes.
Okay, your dad. Okay, and then tell us about the rooms you stayed in during this period of time, October, November, December of 2016. Regular hospital rooms?
So first the emergency room, then the PICU. The most distinguishing thing about the PICU, even though every room kind of has it, it's the circular clock. And I remember that because that's all I looked at for days, and I just heard it tick because I didn't have the strength to watch anything on the TV. And then when I was moved up from the PICU to a different floor, I believe it was 7. I stayed on 7 a lot. I had multiple different rooms, even though their policy is every 30 days you switch a room. I think I stayed there over 90 days, but I had way more than 3 rooms. And these rooms had surveillance cameras. And when I was placed in those rooms with the surveillance cameras, I was told that to not worry about them, they don't work.
So now, if we could, there's been allegations here that you were outside your room 95% of the time. Can you tell the jury whether that's true?
That's not true at all. Most of the time I was in my room. There were times where I went to PT, which I was outside my room, and there was a few occasions where I went to the rec room. But for, I would say, the majority of my time, I was kept in my room.
And did the rooms have the kids that were there, their names on the door or next to the door?
So at one point, I started to get wheeled out into the hallways and whatnot, and that's when I was going to PT or the rec room. And I noticed something really.
This was a part of her testimony that I found interesting. Well, let me try to caveat this. Maya is the plaintiff in this case. She has lived with these facts for years. As you guys will have gathered from the testimony, she was 10 years old when these things were taking place. She is now 17 years of age. These are 7 years ago. And she obviously has a lot that she wants to say. And she's trying to stay within the confines of what her attorney is asking her. But you can see her expounding. And I try to caution witnesses against this because sometimes it can feel like, to a jury, and I have no idea how the jury is perceiving this, but sometimes it can feel to a jury that the person is wanting to tell you something rather than just telling you something. And I thought she kind of bordered there with security cameras. We've heard arguments about the security cameras and whether they would be allowed in or not. And it felt like she was pushing for that to be allowed in. But again, I don't discredit her for this. She has lived with this. This is serious for her. She wants to get this in. And this is one of the things that you run into with parties. Parties are allowed to be in the courtroom during all these arguments, and they'll hear a judge say no, and they might really believe that it's relevant, and they want to get in. They want to get it in. They want to expound. They want to explain their version because that's what they have lived with. It's a challenge, though, because the attorney is trying to navigate through the evidentiary rulings that have been made before. So while the client might really, really want to go there, the attorney is trying to keep them focused on topic. And with parties, it's exceptionally difficult because this is exceedingly emotional for Maya. This is very clearly a very emotional topic. She wants to testify to all of these things, even though they might have been outside the bounds of what the judge said could or couldn't come in. The security cameras being one example. She kind of goes and over provides information a little bit. I don't think it harmed her credibility. I think she did pretty well on the stand. Honestly, for a 17-year-old, this girl testifies like she's in her 30s. I mean, it was really good. You'll catch a few hiccups here and there. Well, she'll say "gotcha" and and different things that you would expect from a younger individual. But she does a great job for a 17-year-old. This is everyone that has testified beforehand how she is wise above her years. I have no reason to discredit that. She does a really good job. There's just little things that you'll catch here and there. So, and yeah, I see the people about the commenting on the law and crime. If you want to engage in that chat, you are free to do so. I caution against it because there's a lot of people in there that just have all kinds of opinions, and they give one-off comments. But I've seen a bunch of them that were really bad takes, and I can see how a lot of people might want to not engage in those chats. But you're free to talk about it here.
Really weird was that all the other rooms on the floor, they had name tags. It would say the patient's name and just the last initial. Whereas with mine, I just had a sheet of paper in there with color-coded stickers. I asked the nurses what the color corresponded to and what that meant and why I didn't have a name, and they would not tell me. I asked multiple nurses and all of them said, I can't tell you.
During this period of time, do you recall an instance where your mom was trying to get in touch with you and the nurse said something different than just simply putting it through to you?
Which instance?
Was there a time during this period, this first week or so, when your mom called for you and you did not receive the call but overheard what was said?
Yes. So I remember that my mom was on this phone call, and the person who she was speaking to, a person at the hospital, I'm not sure what role they had, but they claimed that I never asked to speak to my mom. I was doing fine. I was okay in my room. I hadn't had any questions about why my parents weren't allowed to see me. And that infuriated me so much because all I did for days on end was demand to speak to my parents. That's all I wanted to do. And I most certainly wasn't just sitting in my room. I was crying.
So now, were there other kids on the floor? I mean, were there,
Yes.
somebody to talk to, somebody you could, for lack of a better term, play with?
Well, it's a children's hospital, so there's plenty of kids all around. I went to the.
This is the last segment of her direct that we're going to kind of cover. because well, there's one more. It's the photographs issues. But this is one that I thought was kind of impactful because, and it wasn't an allegation that I really put a whole lot into until she testified to it. And that's kind of why I'm focusing on it, because I've heard a lot from the doctors. I've heard a lot of the allegations, but this one was interesting to me and it was kind of new. So
Rec room. So for people who don't know what that is, it's just like a playroom. You could do activities. There's volunteers there. So I remember going down there, nurse wheeled me down, and I was just working on some art project. I don't remember what, but this really sweet social girl, she came over to me and she just started talking to me.
How old would you?
She looked around my age, I would say, or maybe a little bit, actually younger, sorry, my bad, younger for certain. And her mom noticed that she came over to me a lot and was talking to me. Come to find out, we were on the same floor. I was on 7. And I saw her out in the hallway one day and I asked the nurse to wheel me out. So the nurse wheeled me out. She brought me to the area. So there's like this on the floor, there's this huge window where you could see outside of the hospital. So you could see like the street and all the cars passing by. And there's a little chair that faces this window. So people who just wanted like a change of scenery could go over there. So her mom was there with Natalie, the friend that I had made, and I was wheeled over there and I talked to them. Another nurse observed this interaction and quickly told somebody. Next thing I know, Kathy Beatty is in my room saying I'm not to ever speak to a patient again. And that day, Natalie had given me this little present because her mom noticed my parents were never with me. I think they just wanted to comfort me, and I have it in my bag today.
Did they ever give you any reason why you, as a 10-year-old, couldn't just talk to the kid next door, for lack of a better term?
I have no reason. I mean, they didn't give me any reason. And it was heartbreaking because, you know, they had my door open a lot and the blinds were open. So I could see other people conversing and interacting. And here I am all alone.
that part to me was interesting because I'm trying to think in my mind how these orders work and what the orders are allowed to say and not say. Obviously, the orders can govern contact with family members or individuals that are outside the hospital. And they can obviously be tailored to prevent mom or dad from persuading the child when there are these allegations in place. This one was weird. This is an allegation that the hospital basically said, no, you're in isolation. You can't talk to anybody. You don't get to talk to people who are on the same floor. And if I'm the jury, I mean, I perked up at hearing this. It was kind of outside of what we had viewed as the most significant allegations, but it was one that made the primary allegations feel more impactful. If that makes any sense. I'm not sure if it does. I hope it does. I think it was a very odd thing to listen to. I do want to call out, there was a very large super chat that I just now caught because StreamYard is updating again. K-Rab, thank you very much for the very generous super chat. Very generous of you. K-Rab, $50. I wanted to say thank you for the care you are taking with your recaps. I was triggered by the openings and wasn't going to watch, but I saw one of your recaps and watched all this weekend. Also, it's a small world. I graduated Stevens at 84 with a master's at NC State. Thank you, K-Rab. That's very kind of you. Yes, I went to Stevens Tech on lacrosse. I played lacrosse there for 2 years before I blew out my knee and transferred to NC State, where I finished my bachelor's degree. So small world indeed. Thank you for watching. I'm trying to give these recaps so that people are afraid to watch this full trial, or people who don't know what this trial is about can actually get caught up to speed and cover some of the things that are being discussed. And I try to do it in a way that explains it rather than just picking sides. I'm not picking sides. When the defense presents their case, I will be favorable to them. I will be favorable to anybody who makes a good argument one way or the other. I'm favorable to Mr. Shapiro. I thought he did a great job today. I thought he did a great job with a very, very difficult witness. I mean, cross-examining Maya Kowalski, cross-examining this young woman is not an easy task. And Mr. Shapiro did a pretty good job. He knew what he could ask. He knew what he couldn't. So let's get back to this. I want to go ahead and fast forward to the next timestamp that I have, which is, oh no, where did I put it? Hang on. I need to take this down for 1 second while I go locate this thing, because of course, 138.51. 138.51. 138.50. Let's start here.
To the court and see the judge. What happened with Ms. Beatty?
So it was my understanding that I was just allowed to go to court because
This is the photograph incident. This is the day that she is being allowed to go to court. And this is the day that she's being allowed to go talk to the judge. And this is where the allegations of the plaintiffs say that she was photographed against her will, disrobed and photographed against her will. And this is important testimony because the pictures, yes, the pictures are important. And the reason I'm playing this, and I know it's a little bit longer, but the reason I'm playing this is because the jury focused on these questions. They focused on this.
They ruled on it and I was allowed to come in person. So I was just expecting my uncle was going to come pick me up and then Kathy Beatty was going to wheel me down to meet with my uncle and put me in his car. Instead, Kathy Beatty showed up in my room a little bit earlier than the time I was supposed to go. She came in alone initially, and she told me that if I wanted to go and see my mom in court, I was going to have to be stripped naked and photographed by her nude so I could go to court. I cried and cried because I'm a very modest and private person when it comes to stuff like that. I have been, and there's a reason for that. I really respect my privacy. And eventually I was able to reason with Kathy, and she said that I could keep my training bra on and my shorts. That's when she left the room. She came back with Nurse Alicia. I don't know her last name, but she came in and she assisted with holding me down and moving me and removing some articles of my clothing for the photos. Now, the purpose for these photos, typically, DCF takes them. DCF did not take these. And they're supposed to be a side-by-side comparison of pre-visit and post-visit. So I was leaving the hospital, so they took the photos before. There was never photos taken after.
And to come to your attention that this did not end up in any analysis in the medical records or anything like that.
That's another thing I was promised in the whole reasoning with Kathy about not being nude. She told me that I could keep my shorts on in the training bra, and I specifically asked her to keep these photos private. I asked her if they were just going to be in the medical record, and she told me, yes, only doctors can see them. She actually physically went over to the computer where I've seen nurses and doctors put in information, and turns out she never put the photos in there.
All right, so let's turn to, first I'm going to publish a photo, 2604. And were you actively trying to keep them from taking off your clothes? No, that's not it. There.
Yes, so that, you see my hands right there, and then someone else's hand. I can't tell if that's Kathy's or the nurse's, but I was trying to pull up my shirt actively as she was pulling it down.
All right. And around this time, before we go into a few more photos, did you document this in your MyCare journal?
I believe I did. I haven't seen the MyCare journal in quite some time, so I would need my memory refreshed.
Let's look at this photo here. Now, it has been portrayed that you were somehow enjoying this and just holding hands. Tell the jury what was going on.
I was not enjoying this at all. It is true, when the nurse came back into the room, I wasn't crying as much because Kathy had called me down after we made that, agreement. We met in the middle. But you can see my cheeks are red, and that happens a lot when I've been crying.
Okay, and we can see a little corner of your mouth there. Are you smiling, grimacing, or what?
I am most definitely not smiling.
Okay. And is that a training bra?
It is.
Now, was there a time that you had to switch out of one bra to another?
Yes, so they're trying to maintain the position that, oh, I was in a training bra and shorts, like we didn't, see anything. No, Kathy watched as I got naked because I was changing into clothes for court. That's why there's two different outfits. This was the same time period. There was no before and after photos.
All right. Let's look at 2604-15. There you are, blue shorts. Now tell us about the shorts. Did you remain in the same outfit during this ordeal?
No, because I was changing into court clothes.
Okay. So which are these, the blue shorts there? That's
I don't know which outfit I ended up wearing to court, but
okay. And then let's look at 2, 3. Oh no, we're going through these. Let's go through these. And now what is that? What kind of bra is that?
that's a training bra again.
Different.
Which came first, the training bra or the oh, those are both training bras?
Both are training bras, correct? They switched them out.
So this wasn't a workout bra, right? I don't know
No,
that
most
much
of no.
about bras. And did you tell them while were they holding you down through much of this?
Yes, and some of the photos you could see their hand, but it looks like the photos are mostly zoomed in, so you can't see their hand placement.
Did you want to leave and get out of there?
Yes,
And were they preventing you from getting out of there?
they were until the photos were completed.
And did you have any control or ability to get out of there?
No,
Physically?
because I couldn't walk or stand.
And this was against your will?
Correct.
All right, let's look at the 2364, unless there's more. These we want to go through. Down. Yeah, I got it. Okay. I wasn't going to cover it, but we will. So let's, what was your relationship with Alicia, the nurse that was in there before?
Okay, so I understand those photos were concerning to a lot of you. This is one where you compare This is one where you kind of compare the testimony of Kathy Beatty versus the testimony of Maya Kowalski. Kathy Beatty testified in her deposition that she was instructed by risk management to take these photos. She didn't say DCF, she said risk management. The risk management instructed her to take the photos. She slips in her depo and says that she thought about them first. The other thing about this is one big caveat is that those photos never end up in her medical file. They never end up in her medical file. I think those were taken from Kathy Beatty's phone, but they never end up in her file. They're not in her medical record. They might be in the DCF file, but they're never in her medical file. If I'm the jury, I'm focusing it on that. That part bothers me. Those photos bother me. That's a difficult thing to contemplate for a jury. And to be quite honest, if I'm the jury, I'm torn with, even though there might be some jurisdiction or order that would allow the photos to be taken, I am torn seeing those photos, whether they're appropriate or not. And this is one where you're stretching on the jury's ability to be completely impartial. A lot of people that watch this channel are mothers, fathers, parents. Regardless of whether someone tells you that the circumstances surrounding the taking of photographs like that, seeing those photographs gives you a near visceral response. And I imagine that might be the case. KBL, I'm pointing this out. I do Rob, but I've not agreed with him once on this trial. That's fine. KBL, that's 100% fine. As long as you're listening and digesting and processing. I am not trying to impose a will or a viewpoint of any of the evidence on anybody in this case. I want you guys to listen to the evidence with your own ears, watch with your eyes, see what you can see. I'm trying to give a breakdown mostly of a lot of the legal stuff. Some of the facts, yes, here and there. This one, the fact that I broke this down is because it plays a primary an element of primary focus in the cross-examination and in the jury questions. So it's not fair for me to go to the jury questions without you hearing this testimony on direct. So you can criticize it or analyze it how you choose. So we're now getting to a place where we're about to get a motion for mistrial.
Earlier today, sorry. So she didn't end up telling me then. I just enjoyed the rest of my visit with her as usual. And I'm not sure if it was that evening that my dad came in with my brother and Father Jack, but I know it was sometime close to January 8th. And I was sat down on the couch. My dad was I think I was maybe I wasn't in a wheelchair, maybe I was on the couch. My dad may have lifted me and put me on the couch, so I'm not sure about that specific detail. But my dad was right next to me, and right next to my dad was Kyle. In front of me was Father Jack. My dad said he had some bad news. And weirdly enough, the first thing I thought of was they're not going to let me home, or that I was going to be put in foster care. And it turned out to be even worse than that. My mom had died. So I was told that immediately after my dad had to leave.
Okay. How long was your family allowed in there to tell you that your mom had passed?
It wasn't a lot of time. If I'm being completely honest, it was actually so unbelievably cruel, the amount of time they allocated for me to spend with my family after hearing such awful news.
So after this now, if your mom was supposed to be the reason why here with this Munchausen thing, and your mom's gone, did they let you go?
Objection.
This is a big objection. This is one where the plaintiff's attorney, I think, he's playing with fire. He is playing with fire. I know that your client wants to say certain things. I know they're emotional, but you're playing with fire. They approach, and they're there for a bit.
Did either of these doctors ever tell you that they thought it was the right thing?
And what we're going to do is we're going to fast forward to the argument on the motion for mistrial. Hang on, give me one moment. 213.
Okay, everyone, please be seated. Are there any issues we need to address before we take our break?
Timing wise, Judge, I would only point out that we do want to reserve some time today if we can for a proffer on the issues ruled out. I don't know if we'll get to it, but
Well, I don't know, but your tomorrow is looking very ambitious. I doubt Ms. Kowalski's going to be finished today.
We'll do our best.
Anything else?
From the defense, Your Honor.
Anything further on your motion that occurred here at the sidebar?
Yes, we again would like to renew our motion for mistrial. This is the fourth time that the plaintiff has suggested to this jury that All Children's was responsible for the separation and the continued separation of Maya Kowalski. Again, this court made very clear to plaintiff's counsel prior to the trial that we were not going to be relitigating Chapter 39 issues. All Children's Hospital has immunity for that. While we appreciate the court's curative instruction, we believe that a mistrial is not only appropriate for the intentional question of that from Ms. Kowalski while she's on the witness stand, but the cumulative nature of this now being by my count the fourth time that the plaintiff has suggested to this jury that that All Children's was responsible for both the separation and the continued separation of Maya Kowalski. Yes. Right, and we do have concern based on counsel's comments at sidebar that this is going to be a continued theme, specifically his representation to the court that he believes that All Children's has responsibility for Maya's continued hospitalization after her mother's death.
Last part aside, because that will likely be part of a rebuttal. The purpose of the question, as established at the next question, was to point out that instead of changing the diagnosis, they kept the diagnosis, and thus Maya had to continue to stay at the hospital even after learning that the reason why she was there was because of a Munchausen by proxy diagnosis. There was no other reason to leave her there, and yet they continued to maintain the diagnosis, and I corrected that. And the court gave a curative instruction to the extent that there was harm.
I again point out, as I did up here, that there was a court order, and you knew there was a court order. Yet you asked the question again. So you've got to stop that, or there will be a mistrial, and there will be sanctions.
I understand it.
Okay. Now, I do, in this particular case, believe that the curative instruction is sufficient to disabuse the jury of any implication that the beginning of that question had. But I just need to be very clear, Mr. Anderson, that that needle's starting to shift. It's not there yet, but please don't put me in the position of starting this whole thing over, because I will.
I understand, Judge. It is a bit of a minefield out there, but I will.
Well, this one is very clear. There is a court order. It's not even up to debate. Florida law provides immunity for anything having to do with that, and that's been the subject of many court orders, many discussions for the last several years. Please don't test me on it.
I will not.
Thank you. We'll be in recess. Let's try to take it 10 minutes.
All right. That is what I was explaining to you guys earlier. That's really important. That is really important. And I think the judge, this is one of the first opportunities the judge really took to kind of say emphatically, like from the bench, no, there is immunity with regard to this order. Do not test me on this. Don't go down that road. Please be careful with what you're saying, because what the judge is saying, granting a mistrial, that essentially goes back to square one. The judge can grant a mistrial without prejudice, which means they can rebring the case and they retry it all over again. How much money they spent on this case so far, both plaintiff and defense. And then the judge going, I'm going to sanction you. Yeah, he's going to sanction you because you're in the middle of a trial and you walk down the road of these orders and the implication that the hospital took her away. And this is going to require clarification. I'm going to try and do that from my standpoint by me observing, et cetera, and try to explain kind of where the court is here. Here's the problem. DCF gets involved on October 13th. Yes, it's after Maya's parents asked for Maya to be discharged several times before that, but they get involved on the 13th. And all the court needs is probable cause to believe that there's the possibility of abuse, neglect, or abandonment. And the court imposes an order. Once the court imposes that order, I just explained to you guys, the court has said, we take jurisdiction. DCF is now granted power and withholding that. It's a shelter order. It says the court is now sheltering this child. The court and DCF are statutorily immune. They are immune from any litigation on this particular issue. Now, the hospital's hiding behind this. They're saying that everything we're doing is in compliance with the order. And I can see why they're doing that. And the plaintiff is trying to navigate a minefield, as Mr. Anderson just said, of explaining conduct that the hospital engaged in that is outside the scope of that order. But where you start to get really iffy is where you get to statements like the hospital took the child, or where you start to imply that the hospital is responsible for restricting phone contact. Now, that might be true with a lot of nuance, which is why I say you're dancing a tightrope. The order might have said that phone calls are supervised. And that might have been the end of that provision of the order. But the hospital might have taken that and gone way outside the bounds there, which is what the allegation is. But you can't say that the hospital denied phone contact and leave it at that. You can't say that, because that actually goes and that says that the order is the hospital. You're confusing the two parties. That's the challenge. And Anderson's being warned repeatedly, because this is something where if you start to suggest to a jury over and over and over again that the hospital is responsible for things that were the orders, what the order did, and if you make that suggestion for long enough, that no matter what happens when a judge gives the instruction that says you are supposed to disregard the orders did not remove her from care, that at some point in time the jury says, well, I can't believe that anymore. That's where we're running into. That's the challenge. That's the risk. And Lindsay, this is a great question. I don't understand how it's even possible to prove that the hospital went outside the bounds of without bringing in the orders. How is that determined without seeing what the order was? The judge and the attorneys are trying to craft an instruction. How are they going to instruct the jury? And at what stage do they instruct the jury about how they're supposed to view the orders? This is a back and forth judgment call. And it's really complicated, guys. It is really complicated on how you fashion instruction that does something like this, because you don't want the jury to just say, well, the judge says there's an order, I'm not going to listen to anything else. But you don't want the jury to kind of say, well, all this happened, but the order doesn't fix it. So you're trying to basically, from the court standpoint, you're on the slippery slope and you're going, where do I want to draw my line? Where do I draw my line and how do I explain it? The judge has repeatedly told them, and he tells them again today during the jury questions, repeatedly told them, you're going to get an instruction on this. Please wait for that instruction. I am at the point where I'm sitting there going, the jury is starting to make conclusions. If you're going to give that instruction, you kind of need to do it now. So I imagine that's coming with the next few days, because this is really hard. People are asking, this makes no sense to me. Immune. No, the hospital is not immune. DCF is immune. Let me give you an example. Kathy Beatty, one of the arguments is that Kathy Beatty was supervising phone contact. And one of the arguments the hospital makes is that DCF, who was tasked with this within the order, the order says DCF is to supervise and monitor all phone calls. DCF has some ability to delegate. And if DCF delegates a third party or a contractor to monitor for DCF, that is still state action. They're still immune from that conduct. But if DCF does not delegate, if instead Kathy Beatty acts of her own volition and jumps in and monitors, if DCF says, oh, we can't monitor today, and Kathy goes, no worries, I got it. That's Kathy acting outside the bounds of the order. I'm trying my best to explain it, but like I said, it's and as Anderson kind of says, it's a minefield. How do you explain this? How can you possibly walk through all of these facts and explain what's going on? To those asking what kind of sanctions you can impose in the civil suit, Gigi, if the judge believes that the plaintiff's counsel caused a mistrial knowingly, then the judge can order that plaintiff's counsel pay a certain percentage of the hospital's attorney's fees. In some cases, if it's egregious enough, the plaintiff's counsel would have to pay all of the hospital's attorney's fees. I dare you to try to come up with that money, or with even what that number would be. So it's very difficult. And how can the hospital be disentangled? That's where we are. I've said in the past, it's a miracle this case made it a trial. It is. You guys watch police-involved shootings. If you've seen anything about government agencies and actors and the protections that they get and are afforded by the law, you know that it extends pretty far, and sometimes it doesn't feel right. This is this case. This is this case. where does the law draw the line? So, Skoda, what checks and balances on DCF? You vote people in office that change the administrative makeup of the body politic. It's true in every circumstance, federal, state, local. That's where the recourse is. That's where a lot of congressional hearings come in. It's really tough. Megan Fox, I see you in the chat. If you're the Megan Fox I'm thinking of that's been covering a lot of cases, it's a very difficult situation because in order to engage in legitimate state practice, they have to be able to do their job without risk of lawsuit from everybody and anybody. But at some point in time, when people step outside the scope of their authority, you have to be able to hold them accountable. I understand this. I understand all of the I understand the conflict. I understand how you guys have difficulty processing this. I do. As a lawyer who practices this. But we have to navigate the law as it is. I can't just pretend it away. I can't pretend that it doesn't exist this way. The plaintiffs have a roadmap. They have a way to get to liability. They have to do that for their client. Laura, my brain hurts. Mine too. It is a minefield. And kudos to the attorneys for pulling this off and getting this case to trial, because it's amazing the number of cases of similar, and I mean not as egregious, but similar types of allegations. These happen all the time. DCF screwed with me, CPS screwed with me, wrongful withholding. The school board did something. Some state body, some state entity did something that was wrong. Getting that to trial is so hard. And these attorneys for the plaintiffs have done a good job of getting it there. Over every obstacle, they're here. They're presenting their case, and they have a chance to persuade a jury. So they have a chance to persuade a jury. So let's go to the beginning of cross-examination. And Mr. Shapiro, again, Mr. Shapiro takes the lead. And this was a surprising choice. I didn't think Shapiro would be handling cross. I really didn't. I thought this would be Cattrall, the female attorney who's been arguing over the evidence. I have found her to be pragmatic. She's not aggressive, not overly aggressive, not sarcastic. I like her style in cross. This is Shapiro. And I was nervous when I heard his voice, but he ends up doing okay. So we'll listen to the beginning of this and we'll go to the jury questions.
I've met people who have passed away from CRPS.
And Maya, have you tried different activities that you did before all of this happened, before you went into the Johns Hopkins Hospital this time?
Yeah, so there was one instance when I went with my best friend and her brother and also my brother. We went to Ellington, the ice rink, and we just skated around. That was when I was walking, and this was in middle school. But it wasn't until high school that I started to take lessons. I just wanted to try it out, and it's something my mom and I had done together, so I wanted to revisit it. It became too hard. My pain increased. I was falling, and I just didn't want to risk a relapse, so I quit.
And you miss your mom.
Yeah, it's hard.
We'll talk about that a little later. Your witness.
Listen to Shapiro's tone.
Good afternoon, Michael.
Hello.
You slow it down so you can hear it.
Tell you that I'm very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I wanted to just kind of walk you through a few timeline events. You might be able to help us with these. So from the time period well, let me ask you first about when you first went to All Children's Hospital after you had the event on July 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember whether you were walking or in a wheelchair then?
I would, on July 3rd, so this is like the first time I went in for asthma.
Yeah, so It looks like you went to All Children's the first time on July 6, 2015.
Okay.
First, you had your incident at home on July 3rd, and then you went to Sarasota Memorial Hospital, right?
Mhm.
And then they took you to All Children's for the pediatric work on July 6th. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Do you remember whether you were walking or in a wheelchair?
I believe I was walking at the time.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, Clay, if you can put up Joint Exhibit 1007-26.
A complete change in
At the top
style.
where it says triage arrival. And it says mobility wheelchair. Does this refresh your recollection as to whether you would have been in a wheelchair at that time?
I know they pushed me in a wheelchair. I had weakness of muscles, but at this point in time, it wasn't like I was confined to a wheelchair at home as well. Sorry, I misunderstood your question.
Okay. And Clay, you can take that down. Just sort of fast forwarding this a little bit. From that time, around July 6th, 2015, until October 7th, 2016, you were in a wheelchair over that period of time. Is that fair?
I was.
Okay. And just for comparison's sake, I know we'll talk later about your bravery and your perseverance to get on crutches, but you weren't even using crutches during that time period, were you?
No, but I was working my way up to that point.
So
see you, Megan.
sometimes it's easier for me to sort of separate this by school year. For you, fourth grade would have been August.
Dude, great job. Great job on cross. This is an impossible task. This is an impossible task. This is a witness who has completely emotionally spent herself and given the jury every part of her. He stepped up to the plate. And let me tell you why I think he did a good job here. He's not combative. He's not, when he puts the exhibit up, he can leave that up and cross on that exhibit, but he doesn't. He tells the tech staff, take it down. It's very conciliatory. He's conceding a lot. He's coming at this passively. It was a really good job. And I didn't think Shapiro was capable of this. I really didn't think he's capable of this. Because what he was doing was he was demonstrating what he goes and he walks through her condition prior to the hospitalization. And how even though, and he actually concedes the point. He concedes the point. He says, well, that's okay. I understand. Because Maya's saying, I have good days and bad days. I have days where I'm wheelchair. I have days where I'm not. And he says, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But on this day in particular, you weren't in a wheelchair. You were good, right? And she says, yes. It was a good way of getting information that you can argue later. I thought he did a good job. He wasn't too combative. He didn't come at her with sarcasm. He didn't come at her to discredit her own feelings. He didn't attack her in front of the jury. So, and based on the jury questions, which we're getting into now, I thought that the jury didn't perceive him as the bad guy because there was a lot of questions on the photos and when they were taken. So let's go to the questions, which are at 3. Where are we? 3. Maya's back in the stand. Here we go. This is the last bit that we're going to cover. And I do have you guys redirecting to Ian, Runkle the Bailey. His Monday stream is going on. I wanted to try and land this at 8:30. I knew that I was in trouble by doing so, but I'm going to try and do that. And I might try to jump on from the shop a little bit later. And Jules, yep, he did. He took measures not to be antagonizing, whether it was leaving an exhibit up too long, pulling it down, deferring and saying, I'm sorry, we don't have that. It was a good job. It was a good job. I was impressed. So witness questions or jury questions.
Investigation, you received no information. Is that all correct? Okay. And Ms. Kowalski, I just want to remind you that you're still under oath. And so the jury is aware, since I didn't have the white noise machine on, we did ask Ms. Kowalski to step outside. So she did not hear the discussion I had with the lawyers. And I'm able to ask almost all of them, but there's a few that I cannot ask. Okay, we're going to start. You stated documentation shows additional photos of Maya Kowalski were taken upon Maya's return from court before and after photo documentation. Are you aware if there are any after photos in your medical records at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital?
To my knowledge, the photos weren't even entered into the medical records, so there's no proof of, as far as I'm concerned, of a second set of photos.
Did the jury hear correctly? The series of photos before court are not in your medical record. Please clarify.
Yes. So when I talked to Kathy Beatty, I asked for her to only put them into the medical records because it was my understanding that that was a secure place where only doctors can access that, as opposed to anyone who had access to the camera that they took the photos on. She told me that she had put them there, but as of last weekend, I figured out that that was not the case, and I was infuriated because she made it seem like she was entering them into the medical base.
The next question. During your stay at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, you were at some time not able to view TV and only have a ticking wall clock was available to you. While you were at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital, did the staff inquire if they could assist you in any way, such as adjusting the TV channel, the volume, bringing an item closer or farther, adjust your bed? And this is excluding the 48-hour period.
Gotcha. So this was during the PICU where I wasn't allowed. Well, I didn't have access.
There's one of the gotchas. That's one of the only few times you'll hear her speak like her age, like the 17-year-old. And like I said, I've been remarkably impressed with her demeanor, right down to her appearance in court today. She has been. If you were to tell me that a 17-year-old was going to take the stand in a case like this and testify this way, I would say you're completely you're crazy. As a 17-year-old, this was impressive. And I am going to put a poll what you guys thought of Shapiro's behavior or how his cross was today.
Access to the TV. So I really just sat there and watched the clock, and it was extremely depressing. I did have the call button, but for a nurse to not even want to assist me to use the restroom, it was highly doubtful that she would go out of her way to turn on the TV. She was very aggressive with her answers about me using the restroom, and most of the time she declined. Therefore, I didn't want to waste my request on pleasure activities like watching TV versus necessities like using the bathroom.
When it comes to, quote, creature comforts, end quote, were you made to feel comfortable, or were you made to or just felt that you were in a hostile place?
The creature, is that about the stuffed animals, I would assume?
I'm assuming it would include stuffed animals, but any sort of creature comforts that would make you feel comfortable.
Okay, so there was a point where my dad was able to bring some of my stuffed animals at home, and those did provide me comfort, but obviously I would prefer my family there.
As hospitals may, and this is if you know, as hospitals may and do use both colors and even symbols to identify patient conditions and status treatments and restrictions, are you aware of any photos that may reveal these placards on your room?
So my dad, I don't believe was allowed to take photos of things outside of the room because of it might have been a HIPAA violation to other patients in adjacent rooms. It was just standard protocol, I guess. But again, I did see the name tags of other patients there, and they looked very different. So they had stickers on theirs, but it was like stickers of princesses or trucks. But mine were circular, solid colored stickers. And again, I asked what they meant, and they wouldn't tell me.
The next question from the jury. You stated Dr. Kornberg recommended first boots to straighten feet, and if that failed, then surgically breaking and setting your feet straight. First, on that line, you said the boots were tried but failed. Is that correct?
Yes, because the dystonia only advanced. As there was more agitation of the nerves, it just got worse.
Did your dad, Jack Kowalski, or your mom, Beata Kowalski, or you agree to boots?
We did agree to trying the boots. Even I agreed at the time because I did not know I had CRPS and I didn't know that it would ultimately hurt me. They were painful, but I wasn't against trying it.
It seems the surgical remedy was not done. Do you know why the surgery was not done?
I know my parents immediately, when that statement left Dr. Kornberg's mouth, they objected to that. They didn't think that was the right course of action and they wanted to wait.
And the balance of the questions I cannot ask. Okay, the next sheet. I'm not asking Ms. Kowalski these questions, but members of the jury, there's been another request about dates relative to the court orders, and I will in the
There you
future
go.
get that to you, I promise.
Jury needs it. They want it. At least
Okay,
one
the
of them
next,
does.
series of questions. How long did Dr. Kirkpatrick spend with you before issuing the CRPS diagnosis?
It was multiple hours, and this stays true with all of the doctors I've seen for a full examination of CRPS. I would argue it was about, I know it was most of them, it was around the range of like 5 full hours. And not only did they just do the examination, but they also spoke to my parents about the symptoms and me individually as a patient.
Was this the same day, i.e. the date he issued the CRPS diagnosis, was this the same day that you met him?
I believe so, yes.
You said that ketamine was effective. It must have been a relief to experience some relief. Did you find that as the effects wore off, that the contrast made it more painful?
There you go. That's a jury cross-examination question. That's a jury cross-examination question. That is a juror approaching this question and basically saying, was there withdrawal symptoms? I was impressed by that question. And I didn't know how to take it. But that was a jury cross-exam question. They wanted to hear Maya and whether she experienced symptoms that they could attribute to being withdrawal. I was impressed by that question.
That's a good question. I think I was so used to pain at the point, and I was so used to it coming back that I didn't really notice, like, I don't think the contrast itself made it worse because I've experienced the contrast pain before as well, if that makes sense. So I was familiar with the pain. I don't think the contrast itself made it worse. I
And-
think it was just whether there was a trigger involved that made my CRPS worse, or if it was just a matter of the drug not working as long as we would have liked it to.
And
You
Maya
mentioned in
handled
your
that
testimony
perfectly.
That you had open dialogue about treatment and that your parents did not pressure you. Can you describe a treatment you discussed? How did you articulate that as a child? And what specifically did you turn down?
Another
So
good
this
question.
would align more with the whole Mexico treatment situation.
This is the medical provider. This is the person on the jury. This is the medical provider. This has to be. These questions are too pointed. They're too good. Great questions. She gave a great answer to the last one. This is really, really good.
The doctor spoke to my parents first about whether they were considering that as an option. And then the doctor spoke with me individually to just check and see how I felt after explaining all the risks. Obviously, he dumbed it down a little bit to a level a 10-year-old could understand, so I can make an informed decision. And again, because of the pain, with it being so terrible, I decided to go forth with it. And my parents listened to me and ultimately decided to make the trade.
Dr. Cantu mentioned that even touching a CRPS patient could
Medical.
result in lesions. Has that happened for you at all?
So every CRPS patient is different. For me personally, my CRPS wasn't a thing for me. It's something I haven't noticed. I did have
Good answer.
lesions, but they didn't sprout from just a touch.
Now, the next question in that series I cannot ask, but the following question is, please elaborate how you overheard the nurse speaking to your mom. Where were you standing? Why were you there? And how did you know it was your parent?
So
This hurts her a bit. This hurts her a little bit because the testimony that she gave was that she heard it like in real time. This then goes and says that she heard it via recording. I don't know if the jury remembers that exactly, but the question itself suggests the jury was paying attention pretty carefully.
I learned about that conversation. I wasn't actually near the nurse or I actually don't even know who it was, but I know it was somebody at the hospital because my mom had called the hospital itself. I learned about the conversation through an audio that I listened to.
Describe how opioids make you feel.
I honestly don't really remember the feeling
Better
of like
question.
opioids. I know I took them initially early on, but they didn't do anything for my pain at the time. I didn't notice like there's nothing notable about them that I could pick out and tell you. And I apologize. It was a really long time ago. But I know that the ketamine worked and I know the opioids didn't.
Next question is, are you Catholic?
Yeah, so it's a little interesting. So I
Here's our Catholic on the jury. Here's our Catholic.
grew up Catholic, and after my mom passed, I became a little less religious just because I didn't really understand how God could take someone from my life so important. But eventually, I came back to my faith, and I understand that was just part of my grieving process.
Do you carry a rosary?
I have one in my pocket.
When was your last mass?
I actually haven't gone to church in a while, and I'll explain that. I used to go to Epiphany Cathedral. It's in Venice, and the four of us have gone as a family, my mom, Kyle, my dad, and I. We did go back multiple times after her passing, but it's just very difficult because you get looks from people and they know that your mom's not there, and it just doesn't feel right without her. There's a lot of activities like that, and that's part of the reason I stopped skating as well.
Here's a challenging part that's a bit for me. So this is the part where I share a bit about myself. I wondered about this question for a bit because this kind of hits home to me. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Catholic convert, but I'm divorced. And reconciling with my faith is something I do quite often. I don't go to mass. I do occasionally, but I don't participate in communion because my faith doesn't. I'm not there. When she gave this answer, I was conflicted when I heard it. And I didn't know how to process it. I found it to be remarkably relatable. And I found myself kind of going, I can completely see how someone would do that. I can completely see that. And it was hard because it was weird. Because most practicing Catholics, if you're a Catholic on the jury and you're a Catholic, you're sitting there going, you go to mass every Sunday, you do all this other stuff, you do all these other things. But people are allowed to have crises faith. They're allowed to parse their own feelings and come back to faith how they wish. That rang true to me. I thought it was very. I could connect with that. I understood it. So,
When is your last confession in communion?
Last communion, that was more recent. I don't have the date on that, but someone came to my house, and this is kind of weird, but my grandma, she's very Catholic. She lives in Illinois. She'll send me communion through the mail from her.
wait, just as I'm saying that, oh no. Sending the host through the mail is not allowed. That is not allowed. You are not allowed to mail the host. You are not allowed to mail the host. That was very odd. But I am not, I'm just observing. That one was like, wow. Okay, so we're mailing the host now. We're mailing the host. Jesus' body, we're just gonna US Postal. I don't trust the USPS for that. But again, you get an understanding when she says she's Catholic and she practices this faith. You get an understanding of what that means. Mailing the host, yes, that's the wafer. That is what Catholics believe is the actual body of Jesus Christ. So just USPS, we're shipping Jesus. We're shipping Jesus. It was a challenge. But I also see the point. If that's the way you get it, I don't know. I'm not judging people's faith. This gives the jury an interpretation or understanding of what her Catholicism is.
Church, and it's blessed and whatnot, and I'll take that. Confession, I have not had confession in a minute, and again, that's because it's at the same church I used to go to with my mom.
The next page of questions, I'm only going to be able to ask 2 of the 4 on this one. The question, relevance to Lent. Did the chapel shown have a tabernacle? Did you ever see the Eucharist?
So there was at one point where I was given
There's a
the
Catholic on this
Eucharist.
jury.
It was that's when I was
And the-
talking about the body. Like it was a month after the priest had come and visit me, but I didn't see a place in the chapel. I don't know how to say that, but wait, the big word that you just said, it was not in that chapel. No.
How did you become aware of?
The Catholic on the jury is pissed. The Catholic on the jury is pissed. Like the Catholic on the jury is very invested in this girl being able to practice her faith. The Catholic on the jury is pissed. So the tabernacle means, was there actually Eucharist there? Was there the host? Was there the body and blood of Jesus? Were you able to actually meaningfully participate in your faith at this chapel? Is what the hospital did in taking away your priest, is what they did an adequate compensation for the absence of your actual priest? That's the question. And when you read into that question, that's where it becomes important. Is what the hospital did an adequate substitute for allowing your priest to come in and give you the Eucharist? Did they have a tabernacle? Were they able to actually perform the rite of the Eucharist? Now, a lot of people who aren't Catholics are going to say that's not important. Or why is this a big deal? It's a big deal. It's a big deal to the entire Catholic faith. So,
Of diagnosis after your mom passed?
Diagnosis of
I'm just reading the question.
yeah, you're good. trying to think of what diagnosis I could give
Well,
in reference to.
Did you find out a diagnosis as a patient while you were as a patient?
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, I got it. So, it was only after I had left the hospital that I was able to review the medical records, and that's when I saw the conversion disorder and fetishes disorder. When I was in the hospital, I just had to assume that's what I didn't know the technical term because I've never heard of such a thing before. But the way that they were treating me, I knew that they thought I was making it up. So I knew whatever they thought was going on, it was a disorder in which I was making it up. And then when I reviewed the medical records, I was finally able to attach a name to what they were thinking.
The next question is a clarification. In 2020, when you had that relapse and you were in the hospital for approximately 1 week, were you at Johns Hopkins All Children's Hospital?
No, I believe the name of the hospital is Arnold Palmer in Orlando.
Was another port installed or was there already a prior port?
So there was no port. I just had the nose tube.
Did Kathy Beatty console you when your mom passed?
She did not like touch me or anything. She just said she was sorry, and she said she had another patient to see and left the room. That was probably the only time I saw her not really wanting to stay in the room.
Given the answer, I'm not going to ask the balance of that question. Okay, the last question from the jury. Do you know if you discontinued use of opioids that you were prescribed the times of alternative treatments, such as the ketamine treatment in Mexico or the hyperbaric chambers, et cetera?
Yeah, I think there was some testimony about after Cantu, there was no need for any opioids because the treatment had worked so well that my doctors at home who were comfortable prescribing them, they decided to stop prescribing them because of my progress.
Mr. Anderson, any follow-up?
Take it then that Ms. Beatty actually did not stay to try to console you and make you feel better.
Objection, Your Honor.
Yeah, we're gonna skip that. He tries to lead her through a bunch of stuff. It doesn't get really anywhere. As he was trying to lead the whole way. No real follow-up, but I just wanted you guys to see the juror questions. So let's go ahead and go through the chats and questions that you guys have, and then I'm going to redirect you to Ian's stream, which is a far lighter topic. So let me do this. Happy Annie, I don't get why they haven't introduced evidence that Kyle was a normal kid and not suffering medical issues. I would think that they would hold some weight. They would, and they did nominally through the therapist. So Kyle's injury comes with the intentional infliction of emotional distress. And that one is kind of just when they attribute it to the family as a whole. That's kind of why Kyle hasn't been there. Thank you for the membership, Lottie Tati. OB Nurse Chelsea, why keep bringing Jack back? There was a lot of predicate that had to be laid before he could get up and testify to the additional facts here. So they had to go through some additional foundation before he took the stand again. The judge has said, it's your clock, it's your time. You can burn it how you wish. Anderson said the other day, you may bring him back several times. Why not wait till rebuttal and cover it all? It's about timing. You don't want to let the jury sit with an impression for too long. You want to dispel that immediately. Jack came back in after Kathy Beatty. Kathy Beatty, Depo, said a lot of things. Jack came in, not true. That's why it was important. Casey Cat, thank you very much. A hug for you because you look like you need one and a nap. I do need a nap. Thanks for having a safe chat. I've never seen the level of cruelty and hate towards anyone in the chat as towards Maya and family in a long crime chat. Horrible. I encourage positive discourse and discussion. I try to focus on, we're not going to name call here. We're not going to, I'm careful with this. This is a sensitive issue. I don't want to go too far and say hospitals should never report. Hospitals should always report. You guys, this is the area of gray. This is gray. This is the entire case is the gray area that exists between the white and black of law. And we're going to walk through it as sensitively as we can. Whiskey Sour, thank you. Rob, is it a strategy to have one lawyer to play bad guy? I'm speaking about Shapiro. Usually, yes. I was surprised why Shapiro took this cross because Shapiro, in my opinion, has kind of to the jury played the sarcastic bad guy. And I think he might have gained some points back today. I'm not positive though. I'll pull the poll up in a minute. Susan Walls, anyone have anything positive to say about any hospital or any hospital staff? She did. She actually had some remarks about some of the staff that was very friendly to her. Horace Welfare, thank you. Why aren't the court orders entered as evidence? They will be at some point, maybe not the orders themselves, but an instruction on the orders. You don't want the orders in there because you don't want people to going too far down the road of interpreting court orders, but you have to at least give some foundation so that the jury can understand how the hospital did or did not appropriately follow through with those orders. Nancy A, thank you. How many jurors are there, and do they all have to agree 100%? No. 6 will go in to deliberate, and it's a majority of those 6. There are presently 12 sitting in the box, though. Casey Cat, Rob, should we worry? Anderson has wasted so much time. There'll be none left for proper cross and rebuttal. He's doing okay. He is. Fairy Godmother, why haven't they just admitted the orders from DCF? Because they need explanation. No one wants those orders in, plain and simple, because then you have the jury focused more on the orders than they are on the testimony. Inelegant. So Kathy breached court order by allowing a call outside of DCF supervision and also being the incorrect supervisor. Possibly. Still a fact subject to debate. Island question. Island, thank you. The uncomfortable truth is DCF has also saved the lives of many children. They have, and they do. That was what I was saying. This area, this case exists in the gray area. If you go to either end of the extreme, DCF either does nothing or DCF does everything. And we are on a slope, and it's picking that line. Where is it that they actually intercede? At what point do we want them to take action? It's a complicated question. Alex Martin, Beata not signing the discharge was the key I hear. It was a big point. Susan Walls, JH should have let them go against medical advice as soon as mom became belligerent and refused vital signs and then called CPS. They could go to Mexico, China, wherever. Susan Walls, that's a lot of what we've heard from various doctors. Ms. Ames, can you explain why there's so much argument over the exhibits and the plaintiffs previewing their arguments? It seems like unfair tip-off to defense. This is a misconstruction of the judicial system. There are no surprises at trial. You are supposed to see everything that they intend to introduce well in advance of trial. In most courts, you have to file an exhibit list at least 15 to 30 days before trial. I know in federal cases, I have to file that whole binder. I have to give them all of my exhibits 30 days before trial. They have to give me theirs 15 days before trial. So you're not allowed to play gotcha. That's one of the things that we're back and forth on. Megan, I started this. No Catholic would ever tamper with the host. It's an automatic excommunication. It's absurd. That was with regard to the allegation that Beata was putting ketamine in the host. The hospital, per Maya's testimony, was alleging that Beata was putting ketamine in the actual wafer. That kind of caught me off guard. And Torres, how do you think the church gets the host? Good point. And this is Catholic lesson here. The church gets the host as a plain old piece of unleavened bread. It is nothing at that point in time. It is nothing until it's blessed. That's a big caveat here. Once the priest performs the ceremony and blesses the host, and the host then becomes the body of Jesus. Before that, it's just bread. After that, it's sacred. That's the distinction. Megan Brogdon, can't watch this trial without you, Rob. Thank you, Megan. LJ Peach, but I understand taking one life is an unforgivable sin in the Catholic faith. Also, I'm sure she has mixed feelings. That's probably a lot of her hesitation of going back, because her mother took her own life. And that was one I was sitting there listening going, okay, I can now see the disconnect with the faith, at least coming back to it. So let's see. Mama Morton, Mary Morton's in the chat. Hey, Mom, you don't have to super chat. You can just say hi. Hi, Mom. I do love when you check out what we're talking about. Kowalski case is wild. It really is. Hope you're doing well. Love you. Trophy wife, you do know the difficulty in firing government workers, right? Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Very, very keenly. So that's where things are left today. Tomorrow we have the doctors. Tomorrow we have 2, maybe 3 doctors. Dr. Kirkpatrick is on the list for tomorrow. Now, he was hospitalized, so he's probably not going to be the best of shape, but we're going to listen to him. I think his testimony is going to be really important. So, like I said, tomorrow, tune in. I will be doing a recap, maybe not at 7, maybe at 8. Depends on when I get back from work. Like I said, doing these after work, It's a whole lot to digest in a short amount of time. And I do have trial on Wednesday. So I want to make sure that I'm giving ample time to my existing clients so that I'm prepared for trial, but also want to make sure I'm listening to testimony. So it might be 8 o'clock. Thank you guys for watching and tuning in. If you have not done so already, please hit the like button. It does a great deal to the channel and the support for the channel. And before I get, because let me think here. Use your brain, Rob. Use your brain. Before I get in trouble, my mods have been gracious enough to save the gifted memberships because YouTube doesn't, or StreamYard doesn't display them as easily. And the chat is very, very generous with that. So just because, thank you for gifted memberships this evening. 10, Ryan Man YYC, thank you for 5 gifted memberships. Icosaplex, thank you for 5 gifted memberships. DSN, thank you for the gifted memberships. Laura Leanne, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. Baby Gator, thank you for the 10 gifted memberships. And Carla Riley, thank you for the 5 gifted memberships. You guys have been remarkably generous to the channel. The Kowalski case is important to me. I'm going to keep recapping it. I hope to see you guys here every evening. Thank you guys for following along. If you do like it, please consider subscribing. Again, we're working towards 200,000. I'm going to keep covering this case until we get a verdict. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday evening. I'm going to redirect you to Ian Runkle of the Bailey, my very good friend, the Canadian, who's going to be talking topics that are hopefully a lot less, well, difficult to process. So until tomorrow, I hope you guys have a wonderful evening.